Hello, everybody. It's Thursday, August the 14th, 2025. Yesterday, we had the great honor of the the Nobel laureate, Geoffrey Hinton, won it in physics 2024, the so-called godfather of AI, come on the show talking about the existential risks and dangers of AI. And as a follow-up, an equally distinguished scientist is an old friend, Martin Rees, the King's astronomer. Now, he had been the Queen's till the Queen departed. Martin has written extensively on the existential threat of one kind of science or another. He wrote Our Final Hour in 2009, and his most recent book on this subject is On the Future, from 2020. Martin's been on the show several times, but haven't had him for a couple of years. So it's a real honor and pleasure to have Martin Rees back. Martin, you've obviously been following this AI debate carefully. Your book, Our Final Hour, talks about some of the existential risks of AI in some ways, although this was before the great AI revolution that was created by Geoffrey Hinton. What's your take on AI and existential risk?
Well, I should say it's not one of my specialities, but I do worry a great deal about various existential risks. But as regards AI and indeed powerful computers in general, my main worry is that we become over-dependent on globe-spanning networks. And if they fail, and if they are controlling our electricity grids, the internet, or other essentials, then within 2 or 3 days, there could be a complete breakdown in social order. So I worry very much, not about superintelligence, but about overdependence on globally connected systems. And if they fail, maybe by cyber attacks, maybe just by malfunction, then we may not be able to cope. That's my worry. But going back to the other threats, which we discuss in our center in Cambridge, we do discuss, obviously, the other threats from AI.
Yeah, and this is the Center for the Study of Existential Risk, which you co-founded with Jan Tallinn, the Estonian entrepreneur, and the Australian philosopher Hugh Price.
That's right. And there we do discuss these, but we also discuss bio threats. I mean, we know what a pandemic can do. We know that a natural pandemic could be far worse than COVID, but we also know that one can design viruses even more severe by so-called gain-of-function experiments, etc. And what's really scary is that whereas you can't build an H-bomb in a clandestine way without the IAEA knowing about it, then you can build or create a really dangerous pathogen in a small scale. And unless we have real intrusive surveillance of everyone with anything like the relevant expertise, then I don't see how we can reduce that risk to zero. So that's very high on my list of threats. The possibility of a bio threat.
Yeah, it's interesting. In our conversation with Hinton, one of the things that concerned him was the way in which AI can create this deeply surveillance society. But you're suggesting maybe we might need that to make sure that there are no biological catastrophes. Martin, when you talk about worrying as a scientist, what does that mean? Does that mean you stay awake at night wrestling with the idea of a biological event that will destroy the species, or is it a more intellectual form of worry?
Well, I mean, I think any sensible person is going to be a bit worried in that the prospect of a catastrophe in the next 10 or 20 years is perhaps higher than it's ever been in the past. And so I think we need to worry. But I think to be more constructive, it's concerns of this kind that have led me to think in my declining years that I should devote some time to studying them and propagandizing the threats, and also getting a bit involved in politics. I'm a member of the UK Parliament, the House of Lords, and do a bit of work there. And
you are Lord Rees. But Martin, you're dodging the question a bit.
Well, I haven't
Does
quite got the
scientists
answer.
worry in a kind of different way from mere mortals like myself?
Um, no, I simply think that these issues and how to reduce these threats and minimize their consequences if they happen, that should be higher on the political agenda. And so I and our colleagues in Cambridge are trying to do this, to try and ensure that we can minimize the risk of all these scenarios, because they are getting more likely all the time, and there are new ones that are coming. So I think it's a reason why scientists should, even more than before, accept they have a social responsibility to harness the powers they've helped unleash, just as that was the motive, as we know, of the people who founded the Bullet Atomic Scientists and the Pugwash group after World War II.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but you're still not getting. Maybe there is no answer to this question. For scientists, because you understand more concretely, using the word scientifically, although I'm going round in circles myself here, because you understand the more concrete consequences of some of this technology, as you say, you're one of the founders of Cambridge University Center for the Study of Existential Risk. Does that make you worry more or less? One of the things that occurs to me in my conversation with Hinton and this rather paranoid debate that now is emerging on AI in the US and around the world is there does seem to be a sort of culture of pessimism now where any new thing is seen as existential. So AI now is going to destroy us, or even though it could actually result in massive prosperity and creativity. So my question is, how does science, and I know maybe I'm not expressing myself as clearly as I should, and maybe there's no answer to this question, but because scientists understand the science, do they worry or should they worry differently?
Well, I mean, they have more grounds on which to base an estimate of likelihood for these events. And I should say, in the case of AI, I'm probably rather in the middle, in that I think the threats of a takeover by superintelligence, I would be very skeptical about. So that's why I said I worry about breakdowns of systems where they just go wrong. But I think scientists obviously are more aware of what can be done in the bioterrorism area, and also by the misuse of cyber. But I just think that some individuals who know less may be worried more if they read scare stories in the press. And of course, I am myself only an expert in a very narrow range of these
Well,
scenarios.
you are much more of a Renaissance scientific figure than most modern scientists. You're an astronomer, you're a political figure, you've written on risk, and you've got this new book coming out, which you've co-written with Alan Lightman, who's another scientist I greatly admire, brilliant writer, called The Shape of Wonder. It's out the beginning of September, and I think I'll try and get Lightman on the show to talk more specifically about the book when it gets published. It's called The Shape of Wonder, How Scientists Think, Work, and Live. You are intimate with how scientists think, work, and live. Let me revise the question, though, my earlier question. Do scientists think, work, and live differently from non-scientists?
Not really, but the main emphasis of the book is to indicate the huge variety of lifestyles. If you do science, you can work solo in a team. You can use computers in a big way or not. You could do field work or not, etc. So the book does give ideas of how science works and what the exciting areas are, but quite a lot is taken up with, as it were, sort of magazine-style profiles of a number of scientists, some well-known, others not, simply indicating the variety of lives they lead, all doing some kind of science. So a young person might get an impression of the opportunities and their breadth if they want to do scientific careers. But also, the book does contain some studies of how science has developed and what are the great discoveries and what are the big uncertainties that we might settle.
Does it concern you, and I know the answer to this one, Martin, without even hearing what you have to say, does it concern you the way in which there seems to be a populist reaction to establishment science and scientists in the United States? It's directed against scientists who say stuff that people don't like hearing, like on COVID. And has this changed in your lifetime? You've been around a while. You've been a very distinguished scientist for many years. Has something changed? Why don't people trust science and scientists as much as they used to?
Well, I'm not sure if that's a correct worldwide statement. It's certainly true in the US, because the what I call trumpery and musketry have been a unique phenomenon in modern history, which we outside the US watch with amusement and a bit of fright. But I mean,
more than a bit, I would assume, Martin, amusement.
Like that. We just deplore the fact that people like that get into power. But it's not so bad in Europe.
I remember you and I talked, may have been in person or maybe in an interview, and you told me that at one point when you were much younger in your career, you had the opportunity to come to the US. I'm sure you would have had your choice of universities, Princeton, Harvard, Stanford, and you chose not to. Is that a choice that you're happy you made?
Well, indeed, I'm very happy because I've had a life of many international contacts in my work, and astronomy is very much a global science, as you know, and I've collaborated with scientists around the world and made contact with them and made friends around the world. That's been possible from a base in England, which is a great university. And so I've been extremely lucky to be there, and of course to have had contact with lots of American friends, but I wouldn't prefer any American university to the one I'm in. And so I've been very happy to stay where I am.
Lightman teaches at MIT, and scientists in the US are under threat of one kind or another. Some are even coming to Europe, to Canada, to the United States, to Australia. What's your take on the atmosphere of the universities and science, particularly in an increasingly politicized United States?
Well, I mean, I think what's been happening in the United States is extraordinary, where the politicians and even the president have interfered in issues which normally would be decided at the Research Council level, NSF or something like that, and also in giving directions to major universities in their admission policy, etc. So I think it is surprising, and this is the kind of thing we associate with communist countries. But for this to happen to the leading universities in the US is something which is perplexing to us.
4 years ago, in 2001, I had Anna Lightman on the show, the MIT writer, your co-author of The Shape of Wonder. We had a wonderful conversation, I thought, a memorable conversation. At that time, he had just come out with a new book, Probable Impossibilities, Musings on Beginnings and Endings. And he spoke about the wonder of nature. I assume, I haven't read your new book, The Shape of Wonder. In your view, Martin, do scientists wonder differently from non-scientists? Again, your book is called The Shape of Wonder, and as I said, Lightman is a remarkably articulate and indeed poetic wanderer, both in print and in person. I'm not sure he's necessarily a typical scientist, as maybe there's no such thing as a typical scientist, but this issue of wonder and science is obviously a peculiarly interesting subject, which you've dedicated a book to.
Yes. Well, I mean, what I'd say that in answer to that is that the more we understand entities, and of course the most difficult things to understand are biological organisms, not stars or atoms. But the more we understand, the more wonderful and complicated they appear. And indeed, the further we seem to get from a full understanding. We understand more and more. And of course, in my subject of astronomy, most of the issues we wondered about when I was starting have been settled. But we are now wondering about issues that couldn't even have been phrased 60 years ago. So as the frontier of our knowledge advance, then the periphery beyond which we have mystery grows. And so I think we should accept that science is an advancing enterprise, but lots of mysteries. And one thing which I wonder about myself is, are there many mysteries which we'll never really understand because they're beyond the capacity of the human brain? A monkey can't understand quantum mechanics, but there may be some deep aspects of life or of the physical world which we are not even aware of and which are beyond our comprehension. And we should be aware of this. And we should also perhaps note that one other thing we do learn from astronomy is that although the Earth's been around for 4.5 billion years, and there's been Darwinian evolution over that time from protozoa up to the marvelous biosphere we're part of, this is not the culmination of evolution. The future is at least as long as the past. The sun's got 6 billion years before it dies, and the universe can go on far, far longer. And so we can't conceive the emergent complexity that may come in future. So we've got to realize that the human brain can't expect to understand everything. And that's why I think I'm very unsympathetic to some of the religious people who say, "Yeah, boo, you can't understand the Big Bang, so it must have been God." Most of us can't even understand a single atom properly. So we've got to accept there are all these mysteries.
When it comes to talking about mysteries and understanding them, last week we had a French writer, co-author of a major new hit in Europe. It's called God, the Science, the Evidence. It's written by Michel-Yves Bollor and Olivier Bonacieux. Bollor is a businessman. Bonacieux is the scientist, but we had Bollor on the show. And he spoke of the way in which, at least in his view and in Bonacieux's view, and this is why this book is such a sensation, particularly in Italy, France, and Spain. I think it's sold over 400,000 copies already. That the more we know, the more likelihood there is of God. I know you haven't necessarily read this book, but you contacted me after this interview came up, and you expressed a degree of skepticism.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, I certainly would. I don't know how anyone can say this because we know huge mysteries. We don't understand the origin of life. We suspect this is very, very complicated biochemistry, which we may understand one day. And we don't understand the early stage of the universe, whether there was a beginning, whether there are extra dimensions. And it seems to me it's a flip, unduly easy answer to say we can't explain these things, therefore it's got to be God. We don't know, but it's huge progress. That whereas 60 years ago there was a big debate about whether the universe started in a dense state, the so-called Big Bang, or whether it was eternal and unchanging, as Fred Hoyle believed. That was a debate which was an important one. That was settled, and we can now talk with great confidence about the history of our universe, right back to when it had been expanding just for about a millisecond. But a hell of a lot happened in the first millisecond. We won't understand that until we understand the physics at very high energies. So there's still a limit. There are new problems we can tackle. But I would just say that even problems like that are a big challenge. And I think for someone who is not even an expert on what is known, to say straight away that these things will never be known and they're made by God, I just they're entitled to say this, but I don't think it's helpful. But having said that, I want to explain that I am not in any sense anti-religion. In this sense, I disagree with Dawkins. I I'm a cultural Christian, and I wouldn't want to do anything to reduce the faith of someone who has it. But I don't have any religious faith in any particular doctrine, although I'm very happy to go to church and follow the customs of the tribe in which I was brought up, which is really the English Anglican Church.
My understanding of the argument that Balor and Bonasius are making is that science proves there's no such thing as a multiverse. So if there is only one universe, there must be a God. And again, I'm probably dramatically vulgarizing their argument, but leaving them aside because they're not here to defend themselves. What about this idea, Martin, of the multiverse from a scientific point of view? Is it an absurdity?
No, I was going to enjoy. How can they say that's not a multiverse? That's one of these issues which we can't settle until we understand the physics when the universe was 10 to the minus 40 seconds old. And we don't know at all. And there are some assumptions, like the idea dating back more than 30 years due to Andre Linde at Stanford, which do predict many big bangs. There are others that don't. And this is a conjecture, but we won't know the answer until we know the physics, and we can see if Linde's model is right or if there's some different physics. But there are two questions. In fact, my very first book, called Before the Beginning, which was written in 1995, was addressing just this kind of problem. The question is there just one universe, in which case the apparent fine-tuning is surprising, or are there many big bangs within which, moreover, the physical laws differ between one and the next, in which case we are naturally in one of those that does allow complexity to evolve. But how this author can say straight out that there's no multiverse, I just don't know how he can say that.
My sense is that what they're trying to also do is give some sort of scientific foundation for Roman Catholic miracles, which explains why it's so popular in Southern Europe. And the suggestion is that post-Einsteinian science reintroduces maybe the scientific foundations of miracles, Christian or otherwise. Is there any truth to that, Martin?
Well, I can't really understand what he's getting at, to be honest. There are lots of things are miraculous in the sense that we can't understand them. And maybe, as I said earlier, they may be beyond the human brain's capacity to understand. We've got to accept that. But to say that that is any kind of evidence for the kind of God which the average Christian believer believes in is a step too far, in my opinion. How can they possibly say that? I just don't know.
If indeed, as you're suggesting, it's possible, anything's possible, as you're saying, that we are a universe within a universe within a universe, and maybe there's some sort of multiplicity of universes.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing, Martin? Why are we wasting our time thinking and wondering about this stuff when we're such a speck of a potentially such a speck of a speck of a speck, such a footnote to a footnote to a footnote?
Well, I mean, that's your reaction. It's not mine at all. It's to say that we want to understand how we emerged, to what extent was our emergence special, and we hope that our intellectual descendants, which may be electronic rather than flesh and blood, will perhaps understand this in a deeper sense. But I'm just trying to emphasize that we shouldn't be surprised that there are lots of things we can't understand. And that doesn't mean that we have to immediately invoke religion. It doesn't mean we have to rubbish them. We just have to say that we need to know more, and in particular about the very early universe and about high energy physics and the very high densities that prevail then, before we can say, was there a beginning? Or does the universe close up on itself? And are there extra dimensions? All these things, they're very challenging, and they're, as you know, the kind of things that physicists are working on now. And they will help to understand some of these questions. And of course, on a different front, in microbiology, there's been a great deal of advance, clearly. in the last 50 years. And recently, I think one of the great triumphs of AI is the protein fold.
Yeah, and I know
and I should say
which
that
was developed by Demis Hassabis, who, of
yes,
course,
and he's a very good friend, and
and you're considering at least writing about him in a possible autobiography. I want to come to that autobiography in a second, Martin.
He said that he was interested in science, but he thought the best way to further his interest was to solve AI first, and then that can help him. And of course, winning the Nobel Prize for Chemistry is a good start.
Yeah, and he won it last year, just as Hinton won the physics prize. Before we get to that autobiography, or that half-written autobiography, you talked about possibly our species being special. I understand that you're not a religious man, but do you think the evidence suggests we are or aren't special? I know that word itself is a complicated, problematic word, but would you say we're special?
Well, I mean, only in the sense that the top of any branch of the evolutionary tree is special. We're no more special than a golden eagle, in a sense. They're superbly designed for what they do, and I think we understand the chain of evolution which has led to us, and this has been a especially significant chain of events which has led to a species that can cooperate and change the entire planet for good or ill. So I think even in the perspective of the several billions of years for which the Earth has had evolving life on it, this recent era is very special because it's the first when entities have evolved that have the ability to actually change the entire Earth, existential risks and all that. So things are happening at a special time. So we are special in that sense. Yes.
As I said, you're half writing an autobiography, and I hope you'll finish it and come on the show to discuss it. You are a remarkably accomplished and acclaimed scientist on so many fronts. Remarkable life. Do you see yourself, Martin, as special?
No, not at all. I've been very lucky in a number of ways. But just to summarize, I mean, the book I would like to write is a book which is sort of my timeline, but made more interesting by mini bios of the famous and interesting scientists I have met along the way, and in some cases collaborated with. So
it's from Crick to Hassabis.
Yes. Well, those are people I've got to know outside my subject, but in my subject, it's Hoyle, Hawking, Freeman Dyson, and that lot. But of course, I have, through being based in Cambridge, I got to know top biologists, and then I became president of the Royal Society, which is the UK version of your National Academy of Sciences, and that made me able to have interactions with more people from other fields. So I think I've been able to meet quite a large number of extremely fascinating scientists. And I thought I could make my rather boring life more interesting if I put in not only the science itself, but the interactions I've had with other scientists who most of the public would already have heard of, at least.
Are you familiar with Italo Calvino's book, Mr. Palomar?
I'm afraid no.
It's a wonderful novel about a man, Mr. Palomar, of course, looks out in the world in a telescopic way. He's not a scientist like you. You're a scientist. You've spent your life looking out in the world through the eye of a telescope. But I wonder whether the view is more interesting if it's reversed, Martin. Of course, I'm curious as to your take on Crick and Hassabis and all the rest of the crowd, all the astronomers, the famous astronomers that you've known.
Yes.
But when the book comes out, I think the chapters I will go to first are the ones written by Martin Rees on Martin Rees himself. What will you say about that?
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, I think what I would say is that I've been rather lucky in that I started out being told to study mathematics because I was good at it when I was at school. And I got away from that because I like to think in a more synthetic way and try and make sense of phenomena. And so that's how I got into astrophysics. And this was in the 60s, which was important because that's when the first evidence for black holes, the evidence of the Big Bang, and all that came. And so I had a very good career developing ideas and models and interacting with theorists and observers. But I would like to say that when I got to the age of 60, I decided I ought to broaden out a bit and do some things of more direct relevance. And that's partly because the kind of work I had done had been to develop sort of simple models for flow into black holes and the formation of galaxies and things. And I think in some cases I did a good job. I got the basic ideas right. But what's happened, and there's been a huge plus in the last 20 years, has been the availability of high resolution computer simulations. And well, you must have seen these pictures of where in the virtual world of a computer we can crash galaxies together, explode stars, and make black holes and all that. And this has hugely advanced the subjects because, of course, in astronomy we can't do direct experiments on stars and galaxies. We can do these numerical experiments. And I realized that I could never be an adept solo performer in computer coding of the kind necessary to do this sort of thing. And so the best I could do in my institute was to be a cheerleader for the very good young people we have who are doing just these sorts of things. And so that led me to feel that I should worry about what scientists do when they grow older. Some just go torpid, as it were. I didn't want to do this. Some go remain in science in a rather dangerous way. They want to do science, but they don't like doing the kind of things they did in the past, and they overreach themselves. And there are people we know of, like Hoyle and Eddington, Shockley, and people like this, who embarrass their supporters.
Well, Shockley in particular. I mean, I'm sure Shockley was particularly unpleasant. I mean, you can be a bad person like Shockley and be a good scientist.
Well, yes, but he probably did bad science and eugenics and all that. But I would say Hoyle and Eddington, many others, they did science, but they overreached themselves by invading areas where they weren't experts. And I didn't want to do that either. And so what I've done is to remain doing science and following it and trying to expound it, but accepting that many of the frontier areas are such that I don't have the expertise to compete. And
in other words, Martin, what you're saying, and this will, I hope, be one of the themes in the autobiography, that you know when to step back and reinvent yourself, recognizing that life itself is a reinvention. Final question on this issue. As I said, you've got this co-authored book coming out at the beginning of September, which I'm looking forward to reading. And I'm going to get Alan Lightman on the show, your co-author, to talk about it, The Shape of Wonder, How Scientists Think, Work, and Live. For you as an astronomer, as a man who spent his time looking out at the universe, the black holes, and all these other remarkable things to see and imagine, how has that in your life changed how you view the world itself? Has it changed how you think about, or, you know, you're sitting in Cambridge now, it's getting towards evening, when the sun goes down, when a flock of birds appear over your house, when you sit by the sea. This is a kind of Mr. Palomar question from Calvino. You might have a look at the book.
Yes.
Has it changed how you think about these things, or have you always been, as a young boy, as a mature scientist, as a kind of post-scientist as you are now, have you always been a wanderer?
Yes, I was, when a child, I was puzzled about things, you know, about the tides and things like that. And of course, I still puzzle over things, but I think the point is that when one knows a bit more, then one wonders in a more sophisticated way. but the mystery doesn't dissipate at all, because most of the important questions, I mean, certainly in biology, are still completely unsolved. As I've been saying, the key issues in astronomy, many are now solved, but they just leave open new mysteries, which we hope that we'll be able to solve. So I think if you, just like if you're a bird watcher, then if you understand birds very well, you get more satisfaction than if you're just a very lay person who can distinguish a goose from an owl, or not much more than that. So I think knowing more does deepen one's appreciation of the natural world. And of
In other
course,
words, knowing more makes you more humble. And if there is an advert for the humble scientist, it's my old friend Martin Rees, the co-author of The Shape of Wonder. Martin, continue doing your remarkable work on every front, politically, culturally, scientifically. You are a treasure in the UK and in the world. Wonderful, as always, to see you looking so well, so much vitality. And I'd love to have you back on the show. There's so much more to talk about. Thank you so much.
well, thank you very much for having me and for the conversation.